Welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs, and I've been in business since 1994. The purpose of this podcast is to give you the real deal of the truth, what really works, and most importantly, why things work. And I want to add to this introduction a little bit this morning and say, mostly serving the Central Florida area, that is where my influence is. So, obviously I appreciate everybody listening outside of that. I'm just saying that it's more of a community thing here. And so I really want to be that voice for people here because, man, there's just a lot of bad information that goes around. And I'm going to talk about that some this morning so we can kind of get to the real deal of what really works. Before I get to that, let me thank Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They are committed to providing the finest level of customer service in home sales, and they have the reputation, they have the sales, the reviews to back it up. So please give them a shout, 386-451-2412. So probably like everybody else, getting sick of getting on social media and, see the political fighting that seems to always go on. And it's definitely worsens, in an election year for sure. And, I kind of have to go on social media quite a bit because it is where I spread the podcast. It's where I come up with questions and answers. And, flat out, it can, like anything, it could be a good thing used properly, but, so often it's not used properly. And I think we all know that. So anyway, yesterday I was scrolling through one of them, and it doesn't even matter really which one because they're all pretty similar. And there was this fighting going on about food. I'm like, wait a minute, I know there's always been a little bit of politicking going on in food. If people don't understand that, then, just haven't lived long enough to know that, usually, there's always different lobbying groups going on with manufacturers trying to push their products. That's just, commercialism 101 with that. But now it's been categorized like everything else in this country, like black or white or left or right or red or blue, just like a total dichotomy with nothing in the middle. And I saw there's this huge argument going on between these, more famous people in the political world and influential world, not necessarily all politicians or whatever. But, and again, I'm not even going to name who because it doesn't matter. But on one side, you had a camp bragging about they should only be eating steak and eggs in the morning. And, that's the way to eat. And these were the famous people doing this. And then, some more medically based, expert based in the field people kind of jumped in a little bit and was like, well, not if you are concerned with heart health and other things. And they, kind of gave them a little more factual information on that. And then it became into a fight, basically, to summarize it, between steak and eggs in the morning or oatmeal. That essentially was where this fight began. And you can easily just look it up and you'll see who these people were. But, and it was so ridiculous. And I saw where it totally got into the camps. And, on one hand, it was well, if you eat steak and eggs in the morning, you're alpha, that's the alpha diet. And research has shown that that's better for you. And now all these people that are political now all of a sudden understand research in health sciences and nutrition. And of course they don't. That's just silly, but that unfortunately does get spread by some pretty influential people that have microphones and podcasts. And people got to be aware that just because somebody has a loud voice, it doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about. I mean, I know what I'm talking about, but like, don't trust me for everything either. I mean, do your own research. Hear what I say and go, let me go look that up. I mean, I'll give you studies. You can go look for it for yourself. And then it branched off into the people that were, proposing that oatmeal is better in the morning, because one guy he's a real influential guy in sort of the political world, but more in the influencer world. And he's also like a big fitness guy. And like he was talking about how he eats oatmeal, blueberries, and cinnamon. And so he got called the beta diet boy. So it turned into now that's the beta diet. So if you eat that, that's beta. And if you eat steak and eggs, that's alpha. And I'm like, oh my God. So now they're doing it with food now. So basically if you're vegetarian or plant-based or don't eat a lot of meat, you're beta. And if you're, a carnivore for your preference, you're an alpha. I mean, I'm like, oh my, this is like, and then sure enough, like I'm reading through this because this is my area, and I mistakenly did jump in and make a few comments, and I totally regretted it and deleted it. Cause like I said, I'm just a local guy here. I'm like, you know what? I don't need to like be fighting with these idiots basically. So, we have to understand. So let me back up. That's where the argument was. And, oatmeal has been really blasted by a certain segment of the population over the last few months because of somebody with a microphone and a loud voice. And, and it's like, look, they talk about, number one, the one argument on it has a relevance of truth to it, but it's only because it's true with anything that grows in the ground these days. Like, yeah, there's pesticides, but they're trying to say like oatmeal has more pesticides. No, that's not true. Like, that's not proven. There are pesticides that everybody needs to be aware of, but that's true for anything, so that's the only semblance of truth. And then like the people jump in and say, this is where I got annoyed, because it just showed like the people's ignorance, no matter where they lined up politically, their ignorance of food. And they were saying how, no, humans aren't supposed to eat anything really from the ground. It's not normal if you look at other animals. And I'm reading this going, what are you talking about? And, they really don't have any concept of what they're talking about. So let me qualify this here. Let me give you the real deal. So what these particular people were talking about, they were trying to understand is there, and I even said to them, what kind of animals are you talking about? Because we're animals, and there's predators, there's prey, there's mammals, like there's different kinds of animals. So I said, so you're speaking primarily of carnivore mammals. And there are some carnivore mammals that can only eat. It's not that they can only eat meat. They can eat some plant-based stuff, but they prefer meat, and they can eat raw meat without any distress because they have built in the stomach bacteria to handle the antibacterias, I should say, to handle the bacteria in raw meat. So yeah, they can. But then there's other mammals that are completely herbivores, completely vegetarians that can't eat any meat and eat grass like cows, right? So like apes. So so number one, right off the bat, they're wrong. And then, really the argument was over humans. And I tried to explain to them, I said, we're omnivores. So we can do both. Like, to say that we're not built or designed to eat plants is one of the stupidest freaking things I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it's like, do you not understand we're omnivores? That means our digestive tract, our system can handle both meat, but it has to be cooked. That's where we're different from pure carnivores. And we can eat vegetables and plants. So we're omnivores. Like, we get the best of both worlds. Like, we can do both, And so they don't understand. And it's pushed by shrills, essentially, that are just trying to sell different forms of, say, meat products. Now, before you think I'm coming at this from a complete plant-based slant, don't, because I don't think that way. You can eat however you want to eat. And I think both ways can be effective in both ways, can be healthy in the human diet. But we do have to understand the research. And here's what the research essentially says on this as far as health and fitness goes, okay? So number one, let's look at the Framingham study. It's one of the oldest heart studies known to man. It's been out longer than 50 years, okay? Framingham Heart Study. Look it up. Go find it and see what they find. They find that a diet high in saturated fat is conducive to heart disease. Plain and simple. High in saturated fat. Does that mean you can never eat beef or meat? No. It means you do have to limit it though, or cheese or whatever else is high in saturated fat. So they know that. Like, that can't be disputed unless you want to totally just take away the Framingham study, which has given us every risk profile that cardiologists have used for years. And by the way, we've come a long way in heart disease prevention and a long way in survival of heart attacks. So before you get on your little rants about the medical community, not true. It's been one of the best advancements we've had in medicine in the last 50 years. People are surviving heart attacks better and they're preventing them more because they have the information to do the labs, which they can check cholesterol levels, they can check triglycerides, they can test your fasting glucose, and they can figure out like what your risk profile is. And all of that came from the Framingham study. So it's a very, very factual study on that. So when it comes to that, they were very clear that diets high in saturated fat are more conducive to heart disease, period. Doesn't say don't eat any. It says watch saturated fats. So if you're like thinking, oh, you're just saying don't eat meat. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that chicken doesn't have hardly any fat at all in it. Fish doesn't have hardly any fat at all in it. Skim milk products don't have hardly any fat. I'm saying watch the saturated fats. And if you want to go into it from a hormone perspective, well, that's a whole different argument on that. There's no question that a lot of meats, including chicken, have hormones in it. There's not a question that a lot of fish have mercury in it. So these are different arguments. But to label that we're supposed to eat one over the other is just flat out ridiculous. Look at the numbers. Coming else from the Framingham study, they know that people that eat more fibrous diets, high fibrous foods, for example, men that consume over 35 grams of fiber a day and women that consume more than 40 grams of fiber per day are less likely to have heart disease. Well, where do we get fiber from? We get fiber from plants. You're not going to get fiber from meat, okay? So the Framingham Heart Study was very, very clear on what kind of diets are better for preventing heart disease. And this is where this silly little argument between these people started. Because of that, like the person's trying to say, oh, I'm healthy and my, blood work comes out great and da 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 da. It's like, okay, like nobody ever says that, you can't. But we're talking about risks. We're talking about odds. We're talking about studies. We all know everybody's got an Uncle Billy who drinks a 6-pack a day, eats hamburgers all day, and he's got a perfect blood profile. Of course. There's always that people. And then there are those people that do everything perfect and have problems. We know that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the studies. We're talking about the odds. We're talking about the real research and not opinions and the silly stuff that goes on. All right. So then if we look at, say, the other side is, all carbs are bad and oatmeal are carbs. So that was, what I was seeing from the other side. It's like, okay, so like the Krebs cycle says that fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. All right. So I know I couldn't get anybody to even understand the word Krebs, let alone try to get them to understand what the Krebs cycle is. So I wasn't even going to bother. But it is a factual thing physiologically and biologically that human beings need carbohydrates to burn fat. And it is our primary energy source. And it's the only kind of fuel your brain can use for fuel, which is probably why some of these people are such morons, because they're not eating any at all and they're not getting any glucose to the brain. So they can't think. That is probably what is going on. And I'm being a little sarcastic there, but something has to be going on. Once again, the dichotomy, the black and white, the blue and red, the yes or no's. It's like, no, people, You can't just say you can't eat carbs. I mean, what is it with people in this country that just can't moderate? Like, if you eat too many carbs, you're going to get fat, okay? You're going to have high glucose levels. You're probably setting yourself up for type 2 diabetes. You're probably setting yourself up for heart disease. Yes, but what does that have to do with having a bowl of oatmeal in the morning? What does that have to do with eating some carbohydrates? Like, everything has to be in moderation. And what don't people understand about that? It's because they can't understand. Too many people can't understand. They can't think for themselves. They need somebody to think for them. They need somebody to say, no, don't eat this and eat this. Then they don't have to think and they go about their lives. That's a really kind of crappy way to go through life. And you're not going to get very far. You have to understand that carbohydrates provide energy. Carbohydrates mostly come from plants. The only animal product that has any carbohydrates in it at all is dairy. That's it. So we have to consume plant products to get carbohydrates. We have to consume enough carbohydrates. What is enough? Enough to provide us energy. Enough when we eat them, we're not gaining weight, of course. The more activity you have per day, the more you exercise, the more carbohydrates you need. We also need protein, but we don't only need protein. If you only ate protein, you would not be healthy. You would not be alive. You need carbohydrates for energy. And then again, oh no, so I have to use my brain and figure out which ones are better than others? Yeah, you do. So there's a huge difference between going out to your farm and having sweet potatoes and getting sweet potatoes and white potatoes, or going somewhere and getting whole oats that you hope aren't laden in pesticides because you went to a responsible farmer, of course. And that's true with any food, though. That's true with beef. That's true with everything with that. So yeah, you have to kind of figure out that those carbohydrates are not the same as your bag of potato chips. Those carbohydrates are not the same as the candy or the soda you're drinking. Yes, they're both carbohydrates. They're not the same carbohydrates. One are ultra processed. The other are more natural in their plain existence. Okay? So there is no black and white. We need some protein. Most people consume too much protein. Protein can come from animals. Protein can come from plants. It doesn't matter how you get it. You have to educate yourself, know how much you need based on your activity level, know how many carbohydrates you need based on your activity level. Understand, do some of your own research and figure out what the better carbohydrates are. I think everybody knows what they are for the most part. They just, again, get caught up in their cults and decide they're just going to evil one side versus the other. And I know that isn't a word, but I think you understand what I mean. So you have to use your brain and understand the science. Okay. So the take home message is this: do your research when it comes to things that you hear from people with loud voices on all sides, yelling at you, screaming at you what's best for everything. But I'm keeping this to health and fitness because that is my ball game here. All right. So listen to it if you want to, but then do your research. Understand humans. And I imagine you're a human. If you got some of your dogs and cats listening to this, man, thank you. That's great. Because sometimes Hazel and my kitty will sit around and listen to me when I do this, and they understand. Of course they understand. So anyway, understand that we are omnivores. Okay. We can eat both. So get out of the argument camps. We can eat both. Understand that it is really your preference which way you want to go. You want to be more plant-based because you think that's best. Awesome. You want to be more carnivore than plant. Okay. Awesome. Make good food choices for you. Understand that both can exist in this world. Understand that we need protein. Understand that we need carbs. Make your best protein decisions based on research. If you think you can eat high protein and high saturated fat, good luck. I mean, research says no. If you pull it off, great. Most people don't. So make your right protein choices. make your right carbohydrate choices for you. We need both. Fat just comes. Fat comes with the other foods that we eat. We don't necessarily have to go out of our way to eat it, so don't worry about that. Just understand that you need to get the right amount of protein for you. The more active you are, choose good protein sources for you. There's great plant sources like nuts and peas and lentils and yes, soy. I know they're called soy boys, right? Beta diets. Yep. Isn't that so interesting? So there's plenty of plant-based good proteins out there. And then, you've got chicken, you've got fish, you've got low-fat dairy, you've got low-fat to non-fat Greek yogurt, which I eat, So you got egg whites. They're good. And make sure the farming's good there, because the same argument that can be used against some oatmeals with pesticides can absolutely be used for factory farms. I mean, come on, man. You think that that so many of them chickens aren't pumped up 3 times their weight with hormones, and you think those eggs are healthy? Okay, yeah. But the oatmeal's poisoned, right? I mean, come on, it goes on both ends. You got to watch that with any factory, if you really want to stay away from all that. Try to figure out where you can go to responsible farming, and more are popping up around these days. That's probably the best way to go. All right. So I hope I cleared up some information, and, please share this. Again, my area is Central Florida. If more people are listening, great. But, share it, send it. People need to know that there's a voice of reason out there, that, all these people that scream the loudest are definitely not the smartest. It's usually the quiet people that know what they're talking about. Just learn how to turn it off and go to the right sources. All right. So now let me thank Overhead Door of Daytona Beach. They are the area's best garage door company, owned by Jeff and Zach Hawk. I personally vouch for them. Give them a shout at overheaddoordaytona.com. Please download, please share. Until next time, be Max Fit, be Max Well.